Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen DeLone, COO with Life Sciences Pennsylvania. Welcome to this final session of Tell Me About Your DE&I Initiatives for 2023. Today's program is recorded, and if you missed a previous session in this series or any of our digital programming, you can view them on demand on our website. We are proud to feature two investors today, each leading the charge in their organizations to find and support diverse entrepreneurs with funding and other assistance. This information may be of particular interest to you or perhaps a startup CEO in your network. Our producer, Natalie George, will distribute the link to this recording of the program later today. Please feel free to share the link with anyone who may find the information helpful. Thank you to our sponsor, EY and Angelique Parnell, for both moderating the program and providing expertise. Throughout the session today, if you have a question, please use the chat function located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Angelique will be watching to weave in any questions you may have throughout the discussion. And a few logistical reminders. The program runs from 10 to 10:45. Starting at 10:45 for a half hour, we'll hold casual, informal breakout sessions where attendees can ask additional questions and continue the conversation. There's no need to turn on your cameras for the breakout session. Don't miss the opportunity to connect with the experts after the program concludes. We welcome all to join us. Over to you, Angelique.
Great, thank you, Karen, and welcome to everyone today. Really happy to have you. Really also happy to have these esteemed panelists with us today, to Jennifer Griffin and Kirsten Leute. So just want to start first by allowing them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some questions. Some housekeeping, as Karen mentioned, feel free to post any comments or questions in the chat. We want this to be a good dialogue between the panelists, but also to address any immediate questions that you all may have. All right, I'll turn it over to Jennifer first to introduce herself, and then Kirsten.
Great, thank you, Angelique, and thank you for having me today. My name is Jennifer Griffin. I'm a partner with Mission BioCapital. Mission BioCapital is an early stage biotherapeutics venture firm. We have offices in Cambridge and San Francisco. I've been with the firm for a couple of years now, and I'll tell you today a bit about the work that I do at Mission BioCapital. Prior to Mission BioCapital, I managed the investment strategy for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts investment effort called the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. It's a $1.6 billion effort to keep biotech strong in Massachusetts. And I had a particular focus on early stage investing as well as parity in investing, which I'm sure I'll probably touch on. Prior to that, I was in consulting for a lot of preclinical venture-backed startups, working a lot on liquidity planning and then representing them on the sell side at the time of their exits. And I started my career at MIT's licensing office, spinning out companies there from the sort of oncology aspect of their portfolio, as well as research tools and technologies. And prior to that, I did my graduate work at UMass Medical School in the field of genetics and microbiology. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll toss it to my colleague, Kirsten.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to talk about this particular area. So I'm a partner at Osage University Partners. We call ourselves OUP for short, so I'll just say OUP throughout the program today. But I head up our university relations. At OUP, we're a venture capital firm that invests in startups out of academic research institutions. I've been with the firm now for just over 8 years. We are partnered with approximately 100 different academic institutions, most of those in the US, but some outside of the US as well. We invest in all areas of deep science that the universities are inventing in, and anywhere from seed to pre-IPO rounds. So happy to answer any questions on that. But the focus of today is a different area. Prior to my working at OUP, I did work in tech transfer for almost 20 years, most of those at Stanford University, but also in Europe. And that's actually where my interest in DE&I really started, was being at an academic institution, seeing some of the disparities on the innovation side. So with that, I'll pass it back to Angelique.
Great, thank you. So we have two panelists with very deep experience here. So really excited to learn more from both of you. So in this conversation, we want to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion externally. So focusing more on those that you serve, and then also transferring to talking a little about your organizations internally. So starting externally. Jennifer, you mentioned for you, your stakeholders are early stage life sciences companies and entrepreneurs. And Kirsten, for you, it's academic institutions. So as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion for our audience out there, we know that they are three distinct concepts, but they work in concert together. So just for our level setting purposes for our conversation, when we talk about diversity, that is the representation. So that is ethnic, racial, that's gender, sexual orientation. It could also be different perspectives, locations, geographies, etc. When we talk about equity, that is really the acknowledgement of different starting points that people have, in which opportunities and access is tailored to the stakeholder, right? So it's not necessarily equal all the time, but it's acknowledging where people are to get to equal outcomes. And then lastly, as we talk about inclusion, that's really the cultural pieces. That's our behaviors, how we interact with each other day to day. So again, as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, many organizations shift strategies or priorities at different stages of their maturity, and also to address any near-term needs or challenges that they may see. So now turning over to the question, and Kirsten, perhaps we start with you. When you started at OUP, which of the three, diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're all important, of course, did your organization focus on, and how has that shifted over time? And if you can give us some context as to.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And so I think of it from this perspective is that, and this actually started prior to my work at OUP. I work with an organization called Autumn, and a bunch of us had been getting together and talking about the issue that we weren't seeing parity in the innovation cycle at the universities, and why that, talking about why that was and what we could possibly do about it. And so one of the first things it comes down to is you're looking at metrics, right? You're looking at numbers and saying, okay, so we have X number of female faculty, postdocs, grad students, et cetera, or whatever the population is that you're looking at. And then saying, okay, then let's look at our innovation and seeing what's happening in that. So we look at our invention disclosure numbers, our patenting numbers, and then startup founders. So those are three of the main areas. And we were seeing that there wasn't equity across those, right? So talking about what you mentioned before is you want to get to the point potentially of equity on this. And we were seeing that there wasn't, so the percentage, the rates weren't matching with each other as it should have. In fact, if you look across the board, there's a certain percentage, for example, of female faculty, and I'm going to concentrate a lot on the gender disparity here, just because that's what we've concentrated on. But there was a certain percentage of female faculty, and when you looked at their invention disclosure rates, those weren't necessarily on par with that. And then it went down even further when you looked at patenting, and then particularly when it got to entrepreneurship. And so there have been a number of studies that I've been involved with on this. I'm going to put some of them in the chat, but the first one that I'm going to mention actually is one that Stephanie Stamen, formerly of OUP, worked on. She's just a fantastic person, also in the Philly area, who actually, apparently I can't put this in the chat, but maybe I'll put it to Natalie, and she can put it in the chat for everyone. So this is an article that she did actually on research into our own database on rates of innovation of women at the universities, and looking at what their percentage is as far as creating startups. And so for us, it was a lot of looking at, okay, there is a disparity here, right? And so we're looking at those numbers, and then we look at, so why is there a disparity? And then what can we do about that disparity? So here's the facts. Here's questioning, why and digging into that research on why, and then what you can do to address the why. And so that is kind of what has informed the programs that we have done. And I'll maybe pause there because I think your question was around what we looked at first and then what we were going to do about it. So I'll pause there as to how the approach that we took on this.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I really love that you talked about using that data-driven approach, because many times in organizations, perhaps there's great intentions to fix an issue, right? Or there's an acknowledgement or a feeling, but it's not always backed by metrics and data. So I'm glad that you shared with us the tools and the measurements that you use to really inform that strategy. So with that, Jennifer, I would love to hear your experience at Mission BioCapital, what you all are focused on.
Yeah, so like Kirsten, I first was exposed to the challenges around parity in early stage innovation within the academic environment when I worked at MIT, but I didn't really do anything about it until I worked for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And again, it was data driven. So it was looking at the percentage of VC dollars that actually go to companies founded by underrepresented individuals. And so most of us are probably familiar with these statistics, but it's a really depressing about 2% of American venture capital dollars go to companies founded by women, and far less when it comes to people of color. And so for me, that was shocking. And intuitively, I didn't think it was a lack of founder identity represented. I knew a lot of female founders. I knew, other types of identities represented, but why weren't they getting funded? So I began the approach from the diversity aspect of your question of like, okay, what's the problem here in the parity? And the program that similar to the program that Kirsten will tell you about, where there's a cohort of underrepresented founders that are supported each year through mentoring and coaching, and also investment in the program that I built in Massachusetts. And very quickly you realized, I have a list of about 150 uniquely founded, women-founded, early-stage life science companies. So it's not actually, representation. The representation is there. It's the next step in the problem. So it's more about the equity and the inclusion, and how do you get in front of investors if you're outside of the traditional network of venture capital? How do you get taken seriously? How do you address the biases that we all have when you're pitching? These are real problems that are backed by data. So throughout the work that I did when I got to Mission BioCapital, it continued to be about diversity. So finding programs that were sort of spotlighting, widening the funnel in a sense, but more spotlighting, people that have historically been excluded, but then also moving towards equity and inclusion, and in a broader sense for the industry, and providing, for us, we moved on to build a program that provided tools and best practices for our portfolio companies so that they could, from day one, because we do seed stage investing, think about diversity, equity, inclusion as they build their mission and their culture and their values, as they think about the number 3, 4, 5 hires, and really setting that tone of inclusion from day one. So it's been sort of a journey, but it started with representation and diversity.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. So I see a theme here, which is, starting with representation, really getting into the data and numbers and really understanding what that looks like. And Jennifer, to your point, representation is out there. It's just a matter of the resources and the programming to make sure that people get the access and opportunities, which it seems like both of you are really focused in that area now and just expanding. So talking about resources and programs, so we'll share more about that. Kirsten, for you, in your role, you're an enabler of the pipeline of talent, I will say, and new entrants into this life sciences and technology company ecosystem as a resource for academic institutions to grow. So could you share with us some best practices or lessons learned around preparing startups for investment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And oh, sorry, someone, there's feedback from someone. Thank you. And for us, it's like preparing founders, right? And early on, helping them. So I was part of a study that was published, I think, like almost 2 years ago now, where we actually did a survey of academic female inventors and talked to them about, okay, you have taken this journey. What were the obstacles? What were the barriers that you encountered as a part of your innovation journey? And so we gathered a lot of data. We had actually over 160 people respond to the survey, and put that all together into an article that we wrote about what the barriers were that they were encountering, and said, okay, well, these are the barriers. So what can we do about these these barriers? And so I'm trying to list all of them off the top of my head, but it was mentorship, training, funding, time, network. And I think there might have been one more, but those were kind of the main five. And from that, we've actually been developing programs that already address a number of those, but it kind of put us everything in context for us. Like, this is what they're saying, what would they feel like they're missing in order to make their journey just, that much more palatable, and not as steep of a hill to climb. It's still a hard hill to climb for anybody to be a founder of a company, but making it perhaps just a little bit easier to make that climb. So those were the main areas. What we have done, some of the things that we have done in this area is that one of the things that we've been hearing from people for a long time was, boy, I just don't know anyone who's done something like what I'm trying to do that looks like me, and has my background. And so one of the things that we started a few years ago at OUP was we started a series of interviews with female founders and with female academic founders, and coming from all industry areas and all starting points. They could be grad students, postdocs, faculty members, et cetera, at the start of their journey. And we talk with them about, talk to us about how you started your journey. Who was there for you early on? Did you have a mentor? Did you have someone who inspired you, who you could go and talk with questions? What was your experience like pitching? Did you find your experience to be different than your male counterparts? And part of this was just putting out data so that people could read and be like, oh, I identify with that. Like, that actually resonates with me, or maybe that doesn't resonate with you. And that's okay too. Like, so people don't have all the same experience on this. So that was one thing that we started a few years ago, or a couple of years ago. And then we've been involved in this program called Equalize, as well, which was the brainchild of Nicole Mercier at WashU in St. Louis. She is the head of their tech transfer operation there, and she had started a program internally at WashU because she had seen this huge disparity amongst their academicians and their involvement in the innovation process. And she said, really wonderful, we had a nationwide program where people could talk with each other. So it's not just always about building network and building a network to other investors and to company leaders, et cetera, but it's sometimes building network amongst your peers. And so we started this program called Equalize, which is a national mentor training and pitch program. We are now going into our 5th year on that, and I'm happy to talk more about it, but that's just some of the things that we've been identifying, then the issues, and developing programs to address them. So I hope I've answered your question, but
Yeah, no, that was great, and loved hearing about those programs. Love the listening strategy. So it seems like you went out, you listened to what the actual needs are, and use that as the inspiration to prioritize and form those programs. So would love to hear, is there a success story you can share with us? Maybe somebody who went through a program on one end and came out on the other end very successful?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we are now going into our 5th year. Our first year, we had, I think, 12 people in the program. This year, we're going to have close to 30. It looks like people in the program. So actually, I'm going to talk about, what I consider a success story. But I'm also going to say, like, part of the thing that it's hard to tackle, I think, on these areas with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion is that it is almost a hand-to-hand, not battle, but hand-to-hand helping. Then saying like, well, we're just going to create this program and en masse, everyone's going to be helped by it. That's difficult to do because in order to change people's perspectives and attitudes and practices, you really have to work with people one at a time. And the hope is, of course, then they're going to be able to do that for others. And so what was one of the wonderful things about our program is that the people who've been a part of it early on, we've asked them to come back and talk with our current cohorts. And one of the things that we're really trying to focus on in the future actually is maintaining this connectivity between all these people who've gone through the programs. But one example of someone who went through our program early on is Martina Roos of, I think it's Sardona Therapeutics. She was at UCLA, I believe an early stage faculty member at the time. But she was really interested in starting a company. And she ended up leaving her position and going full time with the company, becoming CEO of the company. And she had a great raise this last year. And it's funny when I talk with people either about women who are making it in as CEOs in the field, like her name will come up from other investors and people in the field, et cetera. And I'm like, that's so wonderful. Like we maybe had just a small part of that. But it is great to see someone, just be such a what we consider a success because she has gone off and done the full-fledged, I'm going to be the CEO, I'm going to raise be the main person kind of spearheading the raising of our rounds. So we're very excited about everything that she's done. And almost all the kudos are on her. But the fact that we perhaps were there at the beginning makes us feel very proud. So.
Yeah, I love that. I love hearing personalized stories like that all the time because it just makes you feel it's more relatable, right? Like to really be a part of someone's journey. And something else that you said really resonated, which is that enablement piece. It's so true. Many organizations that we work with at EY too, when we're helping with DE&I initiatives, right? A lot of organizations struggle with, we want to help everyone all at the same time. It's like, how do you make sure that everyone feels like they get the opportunity, but you hit the nail on the head when it's really, it's something where you can empower those who go through those programs to continue to pay it forward and really scale it. So love that.
I'll just tack right on to what you just said, because one of the things I meant to say was that, we've started this program with 12 people, right? Now we're going to be at close to 30 people. Each person gets a one-to-one mentor for the first 6 months of the program. And in order for us to do that, right, we had to expand our mentor network. And now we have people who come to us and say, or we get introductions from people, hey, I think this person would be a great mentor for you. So sometimes it's just the building up. Again, it's the climbing that hill, but you're building up the momentum of people. But then you have more of this network and this kind of, hub, but this spoke model of people being able to reach out more and make more touches and enable more people with what it is, driving them forward towards this innovation journey.
Oh, I love that. So one more question for you, and then we'll turn the focus a little bit more on Mission BioCapital for you, Jennifer. So Kirsten, when we talk about the academic institutions that you partner with, wanted to learn more about what does that partnership look like? How do you go about choosing an academic institution, and what are the things that you look for? Are there any criteria for that?
Thanks. It's a little bit of a different type of question, but I'm very happy to answer that. So when we started doing what we do, which is investing in startups out of academic institutions, and we partner with the academic institutions because our focus is on investing through something called participation rights that the universities have in their licenses. And we actually share a portion of our profits, a portion of our carry with the institutions based on this partnership that we have. So we started out with, honestly, 5 to 8 institutions. We now have partnerships with over 100 different institutions, and we have diversified how those partnerships happen. So we started out with what we call our core partners, who pre-assign their participation rights to us for the term of the fund. But most of our partners work with us non-exclusively. Basically, it is a partnership where we track their startup companies and we potentially look at them for investment along, all these different stages that we possibly invest in. So most of our partners start off with us in this very non-exclusive manner, where they actually often people are partnering with us because we have a lot of resources for academic startups. We have a webinar series. We have VC education that we do on campuses. We have a partner portal that have a lot of resources on it. There's a whole host of things, but people often are interested in working with us, not just for the potential investment and the feedback on their companies, et cetera, but because we have all of these resources for both the tech transfer operations and the new ventures and entrepreneurial operations at the universities. So if people are interested in working with us, they can come and talk with me. I can describe more about what we do and how the partnering works, but it is actually a very easy process in many ways. But obviously our focus is to find possible companies to invest in. But the reason we have all these resources is because we want to help the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem at the universities, and help them create more investable startup companies. So it's a win-win situation, I think, for everyone.
Perfect. I love that. And I love that you shared that because, again, even just looking through the diversity of partners that you have, right? It's not just top tier institutions or exclusive. It truly is a diverse ecosystem in which if you are a founder in an academic institution, there's an opportunity for you. So I love that you shared that. I'll transition over to Jennifer, and there is a question for Vanessa. So Kirsten, you can jump in here, but Jennifer, you can also address this when you speak as well. Vanessa asks, how can I get people to notice me and gain more visibility? Do you have specific tips? I think, Jennifer, that speaks well to what you will share with us as well. And then Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong. Are you a founder? Are you if you could share a little bit more context for your question, perhaps our panelists here can address that. So while we wait for that follow-up, so Jennifer, you shared with us earlier, your experience working with early stage founders. You've also demonstrated your continued contributions to DE&I throughout your career, like your work at the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. So could you walk us through how you and the fund make investments decisions in this space and how you partner with founders and other funds, and if you can share a little bit about some of the resources or programs that you have to enable diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, sure. So, on one side of the coin, we're a traditional early stage venture capital firm. We take pitches from early stage companies and we decide to invest in a small number every year. But on the other side, we're a little atypical because we're affiliated with a network of 22 incubators around the world in 13 different cities. So we predominantly source through that vehicle, but not exclusively, and then invest, again, predominantly in companies in those incubators. And we get to live alongside of them, get to know them, and help them in their early days. So for me, one of the reasons I was excited to join a couple of years ago was that lab platform in a way democratizes who can become a biotech founder and what can be a biotech company, because the traditional model of venture capital is a warm introduction somehow to a general partner at the firm. And that obviously builds in a lot of biases to the network. If you can't get there because you're not connected to that type of network, it's really hard to be taken seriously and considered. And so this model I really gravitated towards because, we'll hear your pitch as long as you apply to any 22 of our incubators. It's a little bit of breaking down the initial walls of access access to us, which I really like. And so we see naturally kind of a diversity of founders and topics from all over the world, major markets like Boston and San Francisco, as well as the 11 other cities that we have labs in, including Philadelphia, with the biolabs at the Curtis Center. So, you know, that's a little bit of a different model, and I think it's enabled us to build programs using that lab network as the platform, so to speak. So we've built DE&I programs on top of that incubator concept that continue to sort of diversify and open the top end of the funnel, and then support those companies once they're in the incubators to think about DE&I from day one, like I said. So, you know, there's a program at one of our incubators in Cambridge called Lab Central Ignite. This is a program that really focuses on diversing biotech broadly. So it has sort of like a kindergarten through boardroom mentality of first of all, marketing biotech as an industry to school-age children from diverse communities. There are training programs to allow you to become sort of a lab tech and start your career in biotech from that perspective. There are later in life switching career training programs if you have a bit more experience, but not necessarily biotech related. And then what we've done is we've built on programs for founders. So, you know, we have a free bench, for example, for underrepresented founders that we run through a golden ticket model. And then we've layered on top of that a venture capital program that I referenced earlier. So this was a program that was sort of a grassroots program of a few dozen biotech venture capital firms, early stage, late stage, big, small, that came together probably 3 or 4 years ago and formed a community called BIG, which is Bioscience Investor Inclusion Group, and decided that we needed to do something that could actually move the needle. You know, we were all talking about DE&I till the cows came home, but what can we actually do in the near term to make a difference? And that's where the concept of building these tools and best practices around hiring and culture and inclusion, et cetera, got off the ground. But there are 8 working groups that are tackling all sorts of problems, including how do we address and minimize our own bias in our diligence process as investors? How do we really speak honestly about why we're still seemingly seem to be investing in white males more than other identities? How do you recruit a diverse board? How do you engage your board in the topic of DE&I so that, you know, it's not just talking about the science updates every quarter, it's also, here's my hiring plan because diversity and inclusion are important to me as a CEO, and how do you engage the board in supporting you in that? So all sorts of topics that VCs, you know, would find helpful to have materials and best practices on, created by VCs. So that's now an effort that lives at Ignite 2. It's called Ignite VC. And then we've partnered with great programs that widen the funnel, like Equalize. Mass Next Gen is the program I created in Massachusetts that still exists, and a number of others. We've also partnered with VC University, which is a program that Venture Forward runs in collaboration with Berkeley Law to provide a 10-week boot camp for anyone, including underrepresented talent that wants to become a VC. So it's sort of the nuts and bolts of venture capital, and we provide sponsors to underrepresented talent to go through that course and meet people. It's also a network building 10 weeks where, you know, our GPs and other GPs participate. So there's a number of programs now that we've either supported externally or built in-house. And I can't remember your question. I hope that answers it.
No, it's great. It's really great to hear about the portfolio of programs and just the work that you've done. I'm calling it expanding the supply chain, if you will, right? Really helping to build that pipeline and partnering with other organizations to do that. So similar question around a success story. Love the incubator model, as you mentioned. So curious if there's a success story that you could share with us, maybe someone who went through the incubator, is able to get funding and is now going off doing great things.
Yeah, I would say, so For Mass Next Gen, actually, we have about 50% of those 30 companies have gone on to close a Series A. They've raised almost 200 million in follow-on funding. It's been really a pleasure and a joy to watch those women succeed. And as Kirsten mentioned, kudos to them, right? We provide a network around them that wants to help, but they obviously do the heavy lifting. So that's been great to watch, and I'll highlight one particular founder, Elizabeth O'Day, that is behind Alaris Therapeutics. This is an NMR-focused metabolite diagnostic type of company. They're in breast cancer, but lots of other things too that help you identify which therapeutic you would most likely respond to and best respond to. So she came through the first cohort of Mass Next Gen and incubated also in the labs. And she's gone on to raise a nice Series A, building out her team now, taking a very inclusive and diverse perspective to that. But now she's also been asked to be sort of an angel investor for a fund who's now getting into biotech. So historically a tech fund that now wants to be in biotech, and has tapped her as someone who can help them with that process of sourcing and making investments. And so now she has a lens to look for women women founders as well. So I think, you see almost like a domino effect of, okay, we're not only helping this founder succeed through whatever tools we can provide, but then now they're, on the other side of the table, also making investments with the lens that we're trying to encourage people to have, right? So that's been a nice story, and she's been successful in a lot of ways that I don't have time to enumerate now, but she's probably our biggest success.
I love that. So I do have a question for both of you coming from the audience here. So what advice do you have for new entrepreneurs who are just learning skills like pitching, who have aspirations of getting meetings but may not have those doors opened, as you mentioned, to get those meetings? Yeah, what advice could you provide for those people?
I'll start, but I think we've touched on a little bit of it. I think we underappreciated the value of peer networking when we initially built Mass Next Gen 7 or 8 years ago, and Kirsten spoke to the value of that and Equalize too. And I think a lot of, sorry, the lighting is a little bad here, but a lot of, the challenge being an underrepresented founder is tapping into the right networks. And so I think being able to put yourself in a position to meet as many people as possible is really, I think, priority number one. I think I initially came at this work many years ago with the perspective of, okay, what kind of skills and tools do we provide these underrepresented founders? And while everyone can benefit from that mentality and that type of thinking, it's in my experience, it's not really a deficit of skills and knowledge. It's a deficit in access to networks that actually drive our industry. And so I think that's really what I would focus on. I would certainly take advice on your pitch and all of that, and learn the skills you need to succeed as an entrepreneur. Everyone needs to do that. But I think as an underrepresented founder, the focus really needs to be on building your network. And that also is a bit of a domino effect. So once you meet someone like a Kirsten or a Jennifer, it's a quick domino effect to get you into the community that is supportive. I will say the other thing I've learned in doing this work is initially I had a lot of pushback from the venture capital community about the problem I was trying to address by building Mass Next Gen. And it was sort of well, this isn't really a problem. This is just, if I would invest in a woman entrepreneur if I knew one. Like the problem is like, where are they? And that's not really the problem. We know that now, that it's not really the issue. That's a little bit of a pivot away from the actual hard conversation about why they're not getting invested in. And I had really good advice. So I was feeling down with all of these negative encounters. And I had really good advice from some senior women in my network who said, Jen, just go find the people that actually align with your thinking and want to make a difference. You need to take all the people, right, that are kind of serving as a roadblock and buying into the myths around DE&I, and put them to the side and build something with the people that want to make a difference and understand the problem. And that really, again, that was like a domino effect. Once I found those people, it was easy to have 24 mentors in a room. And as Kirsten said, they were asking each other. I didn't even have to continue to ask mentors to be mentors. It was just a domino effect. So again, I think my advice is have as many coffees as you can possibly have. Don't ever hesitate to ask. LinkedIn, otherwise, whatever means you have. And people will say no, but the people that will say yes are probably people that you want to say yes and can actually open doors to communities that want to drive change.
I think that was the best advice, honestly, right there, Jennifer. The one thing I'll tack on to it is that, and I say this in part because of how hard this was for me. Like lots of people meet me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're such an extrovert, like you must just thrive on this all the time. And I'm not fully. Like, this is something that is a lot harder for some people than others, which is this going out and putting yourself forward. And it can feel incredibly uncomfortable to some people initially. And the thing is, it's all about practice, right? The more you do it, the more comfortable you will get with it. And you have to think about what it is that you're going out and networking for. And sometimes what you're networking for actually may not be really you may think, well, what I really need is money. Well, yes, but how do you really get to money? And you have to think through that process. And so think about what are the connections that you need? And also, my network now, I feel like is so vast. In part, but I've made lots of connections with people who I was like, well, I don't know how we're going to mutually benefit each other right now, but that's okay. That's totally fine. One of the people who actually approached us for mentoring to be a mentor this year is someone I knew from 10 to 15 years ago, because I worked with her when she started her first company at Stanford. I never would have known that initially when I met her, that all these years later, that was actually the connection potentially that we were going to have with each other. And so the programs like Equalize, Mass Next Gen, some other things, they can help you kind of make those initial forays into how do I have these conversations just with people that I don't even know, and towards the goal of this may be a person who I maybe can benefit in the future, or that they can benefit me. And so always go into the conversations about how this can be beneficial for both of you, not just for you. But it is a lot about the network. And as I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, networking is not as easy for some people as it is for others. And just think about your strategies on that, and that these programs can be hugely helpful to have you gain some comfort and confidence. That's often with underrepresented populations, is getting that confidence that yes, I belong here. Right? Because people do, if this is what you want to do, you belong. And it's figuring out how to get there.
I love that. So just to recap that, what we heard is networking, building your network, having the confidence and the courage to engage with others. That's really how you're going to most benefit from this, utilizing, leveraging the programs that both Kirsten and Jennifer had talked about. So that's amazing. So we have about a minute left. I'll leave Jennifer and Kirsten, if there's anything else you want to share with our group here today before we leave, I'll allow you to do that.
I'll just mention that Natalie kindly put in the chat the link to the Equalize program. I'm happy to tell people about any of the other initiatives that I talked about as well. Always feel free to reach out to me. This is an area that I am obviously quite passionate about. One of the things with Equalize, we've started focusing our focus on female founders. We are looking at ways that we can actually move that focus towards all underrepresented founders, excuse me. A lot of that is through the peer networking, et cetera. I will tell you, and this is something that I'm not trying to end on a negative, but one of the reasons that it's easy to focus on female founders is because metrics are easy to track. And it is not as easy to track in other areas for a whole host of reasons that we don't have time to go into. But you can often look at programs and say, how can we now expand this out here? What are our lessons learned? But also, what are the new things that we need to learn in order to adapt the program for further expansion into other underrepresented populations. So that is, there's a lot more work to do. I had actually asked Natalie to put in before the PitchBook Female Founders Dashboard, which kind of tracks about how much funding female founders are getting. It's a terrific resource to look at. But there's a whole host of these types of things that you can look at for metrics and how people are doing out there. So I'll end with that.
That's great. Jennifer, anything you
would and I'm also happy to share any of the programs I mentioned as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for sharing. This was very insightful. And I will turn it back to Karen to close us out and provide some next steps.
You bet. Thank you so much, Kirsten. Thank you, Jennifer, for your time today and the very helpful information, the tips, the advice, and I think just the general encouragement to get on out there and start your networking. And that can start right now. You're all being invited to a breakout room. Please take advantage of the opportunity to meet and connect with Jennifer. As Kirsten mentioned, you can start your connection simply by going on LinkedIn, looking for her name. That's a good way to get started. They're open to the opportunity to meet and connect with you. So thank you all for joining us. Please join us in those breakout rooms. Ask any questions that you may have.